Hello everyone, welcome to Daily Storyteller. Today, I'm here to help you sleep, so before we begin, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're from and what time you're watching. Lay back comfortably, relax, and let's begin. Part 1. It was the summer of 2019. Four friends, Mia, an aspiring photographer, Ryan, a history enthusiast, Claire, a skeptic of all things supernatural, and Ethan, the self-proclaimed adrenaline junkie, set out for a weekend getaway in the dense woods of Oregon. The destination was a secluded cabin rented from an obscure website that promised a tranquil escape from the chaos of life. The drive was long, but the mood was light. Mia fiddled with her camera, capturing candid shots of the group, while Ryan read aloud ghost stories from his well-worn book. Claire rolled her eyes at every eerie detail, calling them cheap scare tactics. "Come on, Claire," Ethan teased. "You'll be the first to scream if we see anything remotely spooky." "Only if it's your reflection in the window," she shot back, smirking. As they turned off the main road onto a narrow, winding dirt path, the towering trees seemed to close in around them. The cabin emerged from the mist, its weathered wood and broken shutters exuding a quiet menace. "It looks rustic," Mia commented, snapping a photo. "Rustic is generous," Claire muttered under her breath. Inside, the cabin was as eerie as its exterior. A fireplace dominated the main room, its bricks blackened with soot. The furniture looked as though it had been abandoned for decades. Dust danced in the light, filtering through the cracked windows. Ethan found a stack of old journals on a shelf. "Hey, Ryan, this is your thing, right? Old creepy books?" Ryan took one and flipped through the brittle pages. "It's someone's diary. Looks like it's from the 1930s. As the group unpacked, Mia ventured outside with her camera. The surrounding woods were hauntingly beautiful, but unnervingly quiet. The kind of silence that felt unnatural. She captured the overgrown trails, the moss-covered trees, and the shadowy outlines of the cabin from a distance. That night, they sat around the fireplace, sharing ghost stories. Ryan read aloud from the diary, which detailed the original owner's strange accounts of whispers in the woods and things moving in the cabin at night. "Classic paranoia," Claire declared, laughing nervously. But as the fire crackled and shadows danced on the walls, an unspoken tension hung in the air. The next morning, Mia noticed something strange. Her camera, left on the porch overnight, was missing. They searched everywhere but found no trace of it. "Maybe an animal took it?" Claire suggested, though her voice wavered. Ryan frowned. "An animal that can unlock a camera case?" As they debated, Ethan decided to explore the woods. He ventured further than the others dared, stumbling upon a clearing with a dilapidated shack. Inside, he found torn pages from the diary Ryan had been reading, along with crude drawings of the cabin surrounded by strange symbols. Returning to the group, Ethan tried to downplay his discovery, but his pale face betrayed him. That night, the whispers began, faint and indistinct at first, like the wind, but growing louder and more deliberate. The sound seemed to come from the woods, then the walls, then the very floor beneath them. "Tell me you guys hear that," Mia whispered, clutching her flashlight. "I hear it," Ryan said, his voice trembling. Claire shook her head. "It's just the wind." But even she didn't believe her own words. By the third day, the cabin was no longer a refuge. The whispers were constant now, accompanied by soft knocks and scratching at the windows. Mia grew obsessed with finding her camera, convinced it held answers. Ryan pored over the diary, piecing together the story of a family who once lived in the cabin and mysteriously vanished. The final entry read, "It watches us from the woods. We cannot leave." Ethan and Claire argued about whether to stay or leave. "We're being paranoid," Claire insisted. "We can't just run at the first sign of something weird." "Weird?" Ethan snapped. "This place is a freaking nightmare." That night, Mia woke to find her camera placed neatly on the porch. The lens was shattered, and the memory card was missing. "Someone's messing with us," she whispered, holding the camera up for the others to see. "No one is messing with us," Ryan said. "This is something else." In the dead of night, Ryan uncovered a hidden compartment under the cabin's floorboards. Inside was a box containing more diaries, strange artifacts, and a rusted key. One of the artifacts was a photograph of the family, their faces scratched out. Behind them stood a shadowy figure, barely visible but unmistakably human-shaped. "Is this what's been watching us?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. Suddenly the whispers stopped. The silence was more suffocating than the noise. Then came the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, circling the cabin. Ethan grabbed a fire poker while Mia clutched her broken camera like a weapon. Claire stood frozen, staring at the front door as the handle began to turn. "Run!" Ryan shouted. The group bolted into the woods, the oppressive darkness swallowing them whole. The footsteps followed, faster and heavier. They stumbled upon the shack Ethan had found earlier. Desperation drove them inside, but the door slammed shut behind them. The shack reeked of decay, and the walls were covered in the same strange symbols from the diary. Ryan held up the rusted key. This must open something here. He found a trap door in the floor. Below was a tunnel, its walls lined with old bones and more symbols. "This is insane," Claire whispered. "We don't have a choice," Ethan said, leading the way. The tunnel emerged near a deserted road. As the group gasped for air, they looked back to see the shadowy figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching them. No one spoke as they drove away, the cabin disappearing into the mist. Part 2. In the summer of 2017, 4 friends decided to escape the chaos of their city lives and reconnect with nature. Pine Forest, a sprawling expanse of untouched wilderness in northern Washington, was their destination. The group was diverse. Lucas, the planner, loved the outdoors and was always the one organizing trips. Emma, a quiet yet curious writer, saw the camping trip as inspiration for her next story. Ben, the skeptic, viewed it as a chance to prove that all ghost stories were just myths. And Sophie, the optimist, hoped the trip would bring the group closer after a year of drifting apart. The drive to Pine Forest was uneventful, filled with laughter and nostalgic conversations. But as they approached the trailhead, an unsettling silence replaced the usual sounds of the forest. "This place feels empty," Sophie said, looking around. "Exactly what we wanted," Lucas replied, brushing off her concerns. With their backpacks loaded and spirits high, they hiked deep into the woods, eventually finding a clearing to set up camp. As the sun dipped below the treetops, the forest seemed to come alive with shadows. "All right, let's get the fire going," Lucas announced, trying to keep the mood light. They laughed, shared stories, and toasted marshmallows, but an unshakable tension lingered in the air. That night, Sophie woke up to a sound, a soft whisper, barely audible, coming from the trees. "Lucas," she called out, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness. Grabbing her flashlight, she stepped out of the tent. The air was colder than it should have been, and the whispering grew louder. It wasn't a voice but a collective murmur, as if the forest itself was alive. "Hello?" she whispered, her breath visible in the icy air. A twig snapped behind her and she spun around, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing. Morning came, and Sophie told the group about her experience. "You were dreaming," Ben said, laughing, but Emma frowned. "I heard it too." Lucas brushed it off, eager to continue exploring, but unease had settled over the group. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they began noticing strange things. Trees with claw-like marks etched into their bark, stones arranged in patterns that didn't seem natural. "This is some Blair Witch-level nonsense," Ben joked, but his laugh sounded hollow. That evening, Emma found a small, rusted pendant buried in the dirt near their camp. It was shaped like an eye, with jagged edges. "Put it back," Sophie urged, her voice trembling. "Relax," Emma said, slipping it into her pocket. "It's probably just a souvenir someone dropped." But that night, the whispers returned, louder, closer. Lucas woke the others when he saw movement outside the tent. "There's someone out there," he whispered, his voice shaking. Ben grabbed a flashlight and stormed out. "All right, whoever you are, we're not scared." The beam of light revealed nothing but empty woods, yet the group couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The next morning, they found their campsite in disarray. Their supplies were scattered, tents slashed, and Emma's notebook was torn to pieces. "An animal did this," Lucas said, trying to calm everyone. "An animal doesn't write this," Sophie said, holding up a piece of the notebook. Scrawled across the page in shaky handwriting were the words, "Leave now, before it's too late." Panic set in. Ben insisted they leave immediately, but Lucas argued that it was just a prank. "You want to hike back through the woods at night? That's a worse idea," Lucas said. Reluctantly, they agreed to stay one more night, but no one could shake the growing sense of dread. As darkness fell, the forest seemed to close in around them. The whispers grew into guttural voices. Shapes moved just beyond the firelight, their silhouettes impossibly tall and thin. Then came the screams. Sophie was the first to run, disappearing into the trees as the others called after her. Lucas grabbed a flashlight and chased after her, with Ben and Emma following close behind. They found Sophie standing in a clearing, frozen in terror. Before her was a massive tree, its bark twisted to resemble faces, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams. "We need to go, now," Lucas said, pulling Sophie away, but the forest wouldn't let them leave. No matter which direction they ran, they found themselves back at the clearing. "It's like a maze," Emma whispered, clutching the pendant. Ben snatched it from her. "This thing is cursed," he shouted, throwing it into the darkness. The ground trembled, and a deafening roar filled the air. Shadows emerged from the trees, their forms writhing and shifting as if they were made of the forest itself. In their panic, the group split up. Lucas and Sophie ran one way, while Ben and Emma went another. Lucas and Sophie stumbled upon an old ranger station, its windows shattered and walls covered in claw marks. Inside, they found maps of the forest, with warnings scrawled in red ink. "Do not enter the southern woods." Meanwhile, Ben and Emma weren't as lucky. The shadows pursued them relentlessly. Ben tripped, and Emma tried to help him up, but a dark figure loomed over them. "Run!" Ben shouted, shoving Emma forward. She hesitated but obeyed, tears streaming down her face as she disappeared into the woods. At dawn, Lucas and Sophie emerged from the forest, battered and terrified. Emma stumbled out minutes later, clutching her arm where the pendant had been pressed into her skin. Ben never made it out. Part 3. It was the summer of 2021. 4 university students, Jessica, a history major, Tom, an aspiring filmmaker, Olivia, a skeptic with a sharp wit, and Mark, the curious adventurer, decided to explore an abandoned cabin deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Jessica had stumbled upon an old article about the cabin, claiming it was built in the 1800s by a family that mysteriously vanished. Tom saw it as the perfect location for his student film project. Olivia tagged along reluctantly, dismissing the trip as a waste of time. Mark was the most enthusiastic, eager for the thrill of the unknown. The hike to the cabin was grueling, the dense forest casting shadows that made it hard to tell the time. When they finally reached the clearing, the sight of the cabin sent shivers down Jessica's spine. The structure was barely standing, its wood rotting, the windows shattered. "This place is perfect," Tom said, already filming. "It's a death trap," Olivia muttered, eyeing the sagging roof. "Relax," Mark said. "We're here to uncover history, remember?" Jessica hesitated before stepping inside. The air felt heavy, as if the cabin itself was holding its breath. The interior was even more unsettling. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung like curtains. A fireplace dominated the main room, its bricks blackened by time. Jessica found an old ledger on a shelf, its pages yellowed and brittle. The entries detailed daily life, but the last one caught her attention. "The whispers are louder. We must go before it's too late." "Look at this," she said, showing the others. "Sounds like a setup for a horror movie," Olivia scoffed, but her forced laugh betrayed her unease. Tom was thrilled. "This is gold for the film. Keep reading." As they explored, Mark noticed something strange. A section of the floorboards near the fireplace was newer than the rest, as if it had been replaced. "Help me move this," he said, motioning to Tom. They pried the boards loose, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a wooden box, its surface carved with strange symbols. Jessica ran her fingers over the markings, trying to decipher them. "What do you think it is?" Olivia asked, peering over her shoulder. "Only one way to find out," Mark said, opening the box. Inside were old photographs, a rusted knife, and a small doll made of straw. The photos showed a family standing in front of the cabin, their faces scratched out. "This is seriously creepy," Olivia said, stepping back. Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. "We shouldn't have opened this." That night, the group decided to stay in the cabin despite Olivia's protests. Tom set up his camera, eager to capture footage for his film. As darkness fell, the forest grew eerily quiet. The usual sounds of crickets and rustling leaves were replaced by an oppressive silence. Jessica woke to a faint noise. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then she heard it again. Whispers, low and guttural, coming from the direction of the fireplace. "Do you hear that?" she asked, shaking Mark awake. He listened, his eyes widening. "It's coming from under the floor." They woke the others, and together they moved the boards again. The whispers grew louder as they uncovered the hidden compartment, but nothing inside seemed to explain the sound. "Maybe it's the wind," Tom suggested, though his voice wavered. "Or maybe we shouldn't be here," Olivia said. The whispers stopped suddenly, leaving an unsettling silence. No one slept that night. By morning, the group was on edge. Jessica wanted to leave, but Tom convinced her to stay one more day for the sake of his film. While filming outside, Tom noticed something strange. The carvings on the box they found had started appearing on the trees around the cabin, as if burned into the bark. "Guys, look at this," he said, showing the others. "That's it. I'm done," Olivia said, grabbing her backpack. "This place is cursed." Before she could leave, a scream echoed from inside the cabin. They rushed in to find Jessica staring at the fireplace, where a shadowy figure stood, barely visible in the dim light. "It was watching me," she whispered, trembling. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind a deep sense of dread. "We're leaving. Now," Mark said, his voice firm. But as they packed, they discovered their belongings scattered, some items missing entirely. It was as if the cabin itself didn't want them to leave. Desperate for answers, Jessica turned to the ledger she had found. One entry mentioned a ritual to silence the whispers, but the details were incomplete. "We need to finish what they started," she said, her voice resolute. "That's insane," Olivia said. "We need to get out of here." But Jessica and Mark were determined. They gathered the items from the box and placed them in the fireplace as described in the ledger. As they lit the fire, the whispers returned, louder than ever. The cabin shook, and the walls seemed to close in. The group huddled together, their fear palpable. The flames roared, consuming the items. For a moment the whispers stopped. Then a deafening scream filled the air, and the shadowy figure emerged from the flames. It reached for Jessica, its form shifting and writhing. Mark grabbed the rusted knife from the box and plunged it into the figure. With an ear-splitting roar, it vanished, and the cabin fell silent. The group stumbled out of the cabin, their faces pale and their bodies trembling. The morning light felt surreal after the horrors of the night. Tom's camera was still running. When they reviewed the footage, they saw glimpses of the shadowy figure and heard the whispers. "We're not telling anyone about this," Olivia said firmly. Jessica nodded. "Who would believe us?" As they walked away, the cabin seemed to watch them, its dark windows like eyes. And that's the story of the abandoned cabin. Some say it still stands, waiting for its next visitors. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and beware of what lies beneath the floorboards.